to order the November 28, 2018 regular business meeting of the Cincinnati Board of Education. We welcome everyone and request everyone in the audience to please silence your cell phones and electronic devices. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Present.
Ms. Bolton? Present. Mrs. Copeland?
Present.
Mr. Davis?
Present.
Mr. Messer? Mr. Morosky?
Here.
Here. Thank you. I need a motion to approve the minutes from the special public meeting, Transportation Summit, November 1st, 2018, special meeting, November 5th, 2018, and regular business meeting, November 5th, 2018.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Ms. Bates, would you please present the November 15th, 2018 Policy Committee meeting report?
Yes, as you know, we will be voting on the resolution expressing support for Cincinnati Tobacco 21 initiative, which you all have in your packets. We discussed this in our policy committee, so it is coming out of committee with a recommendation for adoption. Same with a couple of other policies that are coming forward. I think the biggest, or the discussion that wasn't typically, wasn't a routine discussion, was one of establishing a policy around internal communication. There was a board assignment that we should review the policy regarding surveys. We also had the whistleblower policy up, and also some information that I had brought back from the Council of Great City Schools is that there are some districts who are using internal communications to communicate with the community through their staff and keeping our staff updated on what happens at board meetings, what's going on with the district, and do so in a strategic way. So that is a discussion that we will continue to have, and we ask the administration to bring back a draft policy for further discussion. And so I present this policy committee report for acceptance.
Do board members have any questions or comments? Thank you. Ms. Bolton, would you please present the November 15th Student Achievement Report?
Gladly, thank you very much. First of all, we continue to have standing room only at student achievement. But the first item is one near and dear to my heart and near and dear to our dearly departed member Nelms, and that is the superintendent brought to us kind of an interesting idea, and she's going to talk more about it today. The Junior Reserve Officer Training, JROTC, and we'll have some discussion about that. It went through our committee pretty well, and we said, please bring it to the board as soon as you're able, and she did. We also went through something we've talked about before, as many of you know, particularly the branding piece of CPS, and that is renaming many of our preschools as Rising Stars at the location where they are, because as many people know, but not enough people know, our preschools are 5-star, rated by the state, and indeed it's one of the things we're extremely proud of, and want to kind of emphasize that as best we can. The Montessori ones remain the same, and as does currently the Cairns preschool name remains the same. My alma mater, Aiken, since the departure of Carpe Diem, swoop, thank you, Eagle. How should I say it? The school is using the new space very, very creatively, both in the career paths efforts in education and also in writing labs and a number of other things that are very important for us, and we talked about that use. Also, we did some recommendations, and they're listed for you again for the third time, recommendations that came from this page is what was ever in blue for that report. We just wanted to isolate it so we can concentrate on that as we move forward. Had a great report, fast, to the point, and action-oriented from the crayons to computers folks, because they are upset that we're not using them quite as much as we once did, and know that we can use them more extensively. So they wanted to help us figure out how to do that. And indeed, we were very excited about that possibility. We also, because of the nature of the health and PE curriculum, wanted to hear back from curriculum about how they're going to be involving the community in the development of that. And they've already been doing a lot of that in a preliminary way for over a year with a number of our partners. And so that's published there for you as well as to how the city community will be able to be involved. Member Morosky brought to the issue of finding out what it takes and what's the criteria, the protocol, if you will, to have school nurses assigned and various other kinds of health aid folks and what that might mean in a budget. And so they went through that, and they're going to be reporting back additionally. Also, state and school counselors, we had folks both from in and out of the district, including our own lead counselor in the district, present some things that might be of interest to the policy committee regarding identifying and talking about the role of counselors and most particularly their evaluation and how that takes place. We have the initial report from Gifted and the demographics that go along with that, and it seemed very positive and very upbeat. We also got a good handout and a good explanation of the revenue sources and expenditures for resource coordinators and lead agencies, which is part of the power up, if you will, or review of community learning centers that the superintendent's interested in going through with. And then we also had both the CFT and the HR folks talk again about the possibility of not only the pilot that we're going to have regarding teacher evaluation this coming year, but also are there things that we could do yet this year for next year or this year that would be improvements in the teacher evaluation, or at least changes. I shouldn't say improvements, that's assuming something, but some changes. And then next items that we talked about were items that are going to be on discussion. One of them is here today on the board regarding CUCI update regarding preschool. And then the other items are scheduled at the next page as to what we'll be talking about next month. I submit and appreciate everybody's hard work, particularly the administration, in keeping up with our demands. Appreciate it greatly.
Thank you. Do board members have questions or comments? You can, I guess, you all can tell by, it's such a meaty report, now you know what people come to student team, all that good stuff. Yes.
The crayons to computers, I just wonder, maybe even to our treasurer, when we had some of the conversations about the dollars that we were hoping to maybe make available for teachers to have supplies for their classroom when school started versus, as we know, some people dig out of their pockets and that type of thing. Is that a partner that we could work with to make that happen? You know, just reading through their kind of mission, at least, it sounded like that might be a partnership that we could work together on having. You know, one of the conversations was even, you know, a back-to-school bash for teachers and having a central location and have those supplies that would help them throughout the year. So that was just kind of a question.
Wonderful. Ms. Bates, followed by Mr. Morosky.
Yes, and just kind of to bridge my report with Ms. Bolton's report, this is a good example of internal communications. And if we had a systemic way to get the word out when that there's, you know, a great deal of supplies or something's going on, that we have an avenue to do that. So just wanted to make that connection also.
Mr. Morosky.
And Mr. Messer, we are very much on the same page, because one of the conversation where it kind of ended up becoming just go a little deeper, and Ms. Bolton touched on it about the issue that not many teachers were taking advantage of it. We're trying to tease out why. One of the reasons was some of the teachers were newer, they didn't know about it. So we suggested, or the administrator, I forget who now, but we all came to the conclusion that it would be a good idea to have crayons at that initial teacher hookup, to your point, and then maybe you can make it part of a bigger deal everyone now go here, you know, your first day of orientation, everyone seemed to be more of that, so. Because people just didn't know about it, and that warehouse is enormous, they have a lot of stuff, particularly with the discussion of, the new policies regarding crowdfunding, it's always timely that we got that presentation on.
Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, I second everything that everybody's saying, and I know to Mr. Morosky's point, they also said that there's another upcoming new teachers group meeting that they would then also share at that time, so not just at the beginning. And then it was so encouraging because they had a problem, they brought it to us, and we all tried to solve it. And I think the biggest issue was the number of staff that now are new and may not be familiar with this very long time, absolutely groundbreaking partner, which is what Crans 2 computers were and still are today. So I think the internal communication is one. We have a lot of internal communication about a lot of stuff that maybe is not quite as essential as that, but we know many teachers who rely totally, if you will, on making sure they're there at their school's day particularly.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Okay. Mr. Messer, would you please present the November 15th Finance Committee meeting report?
Thank you, Madam President. I will give the update on the Finance Committee report, but if you remember last meeting, I reported that we had invited somebody from the city to talk through a particular project that was a 30-year agreement and to understand how did they, for that particular one, which was a commercial, private sector market rate development, that we would ask them to kind of walk us through for a learning opportunity. Well, they weren't prepared to do that. So if you were looking for that in here, we're going to keep at that, and now we're going to try for the next meeting. But I think what teased out is maybe some people are scratching their heads, and I think it's good that we're asking these questions. So I think they're now trying to figure out how do they tell that story in a way that makes sense. So that is not in here. But we did have lots of other great things happen at the Finance Committee, and I won't bore you with all the details of the government relations. Highest level, though, it didn't feel like anything was going to be hurried through the State House during this lame duck session. And where we had a couple of questions, even from some of our guests. Unfortunately, we didn't have as many maybe as student achievement.
You were down the gauntlet.
We've had competitive numbers there, but all of those, the consensus was there wasn't going to be anything that would make us nervous that they were going to hurry through some things that would be detrimental. But as you'll see in the report, some things that are actually working through the House and Senate that can be beneficial to us. We did get an update, or kind of began a conversation on green initiatives at CPS and just how we operate and how what we do from powering these buildings. I learned a whole lot, as I'm sure the rest of our committee did, in not only where that power comes from and who we buy it from, but what we do to conserve that throughout all of our buildings. And Scott was there. Robin kind of played point guard on this and did a phenomenal job taking us through the learning of all of the measures that have been taken district-wide to ensure, if a little bit of electricity, they can measure, it goes spikes up, they can go find out that there's something wrong with the regulator and go fix that, which has compounding savings for the district. So that was all helpful to understand that kind of component of what we're doing today in green. We also had Ollie Kroner from the city of Cincinnati, who, as you know, is leading a citywide, if not region-wide, initiative on the same topic. And our city kind of set a goal that we would be fully renewable energy, I think it was by 2035, and we would invest X number of dollars. Well, that has gone so well that we've actually doubled that, as he reported. And they're doing so many great things here in the community. So I think what we came to the conclusion of is there's definitely some synergies that we could collaborate with the city of Cincinnati. And I was kind of blown away at how much he knew about where power is coming from and how much the different sources of power cost, what we could do from a solar perspective, that ended up being maybe less than what we thought based on what he's been doing today with the city. So I think there are some definite things there that we can look to partner long-term. So kind of the actions, as you'll see here, the committee will advise Superintendent Mitchell to assign a point person to determine like who owns the comprehensive green plan, because we have some schools that do green initiatives and other schools that aren't doing really anything per se. How can we look at this kind of holistically, because we know it's something that our young people are interested in. And then, also then connecting them with policy committee to talk about, are there things that we need to have in place from a policy perspective that ladder up under this as well. So great discussion there. I found it very fascinating, and kudos to our team for ensuring that we are spending dollars very wisely in what is a huge spend for us in energy. And then lastly, the ever wonderful Vera gave us an update on the workforce development budget, and I think we, are excited to see that go forward. And so she laid that out, and we were in full support of moving that forward. And with that, I give you the finance report for this month.
Yes, Ms. Wang.
I need to ask for a revision, as I wasn't actually present at that finance committee, so to replace my name with the presentations with Brittany's. Just a minor thing, but I wasn't actually present at the meeting.
Okay, we'll note that. Other questions or comments? Sounds like there's an assignment included in that report too. So we'll make sure. Yes.
Also, George Glover was the superintendent, so this can be struck from the record as well. Eric was the one show.
Okay. All right, as noted as well, Ms. Bolton.
I don't have a change to it, but I'll continue my very chauvinistic approach to the city's green plan. As we mentioned last time we met, I think their first award should go to Cincinnati Public Schools, because as an entity spending $1.2 billion, we made an effort over 15 years to make sure that all of our buildings had the green initiative, and indeed been nationally awarded, and I think it would be great for the city to find a way to honor the school district. And another piece, in northern Kentucky, in two of their counties where they have some wonderful, wonderful schools, the whole energy piece is also a career path. And there's great opportunity there. And I know our folks have looked into it, where the kids are actually monitoring the energy use. And we've also talked from a budget standpoint of a real concerted effort regarding green initiatives within the buildings from an energy savings. Could, at least in other school districts that make it a big priority, even bigger than what we're talking about, they do save significant energy monies by reducing and conserving. So it's at least 2 or 3 different areas there that would be of interest.
Thank you, Mr. Messer.
So I'll just give one more selfless plug for the intrapreneurship, because even if it's not a career path program that's specifically with curriculum behind it, there's not a single person that works in this administration who isn't doing something interesting that would give a young person exposure to a job that they may not have ever thought about. And I think having, yes, it's great to have all the very focused career paths, but kind of to the point, anything, just how do you measure that? And we could give it an in-seat entrepreneurship quarterly, half a year to students that I think it would inform what they may choose to go into a career path later. So,
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Mr. Messer. Okay, I need a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Does anyone have any kudos? Yes, Mr. Messer.
yes, I would like to give kudos to one of our teachers at Roll Hill, Christine Gibson, who has written her second book, and this one is it Big Hair? It's her Big Hair series. This is the second one, and this one's going to school. Last one's going to grandma's, I think. I think it's just wonderful for her and what she's doing. And this one specifically focused on social awareness. And Jimmy and I would like to ensure that each of our libraries for our elementary schools have one of these as our little holiday present to our students.
Thank you, Mr. Wesley. Other kudos? Okay. Ms. Spates, please present the retirement.
Yes, we have 2 retirements in the superintendent's report today that I would like to highlight and congratulate. Margaret Horn, who is a paraprofessional, and Claire Lair, who is a clerical specialist. We want to thank them for their service to our children and wish them well in the future.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, we do not have any speakers for hearing of the public segment, so we will move forward with our presentations. Superintendent Mitchell, would you introduce the first presentation?
Here that we present the projections for the upcoming school year in preparation for the budget cycle. And so we have Sarah Trimble Oliver who will come forward and talk about the projections and the assumptions behind those projections for next school year.
So good morning.
Good morning.
I'm happy to be here to present some good news this morning. As Ms. Mitchell said, this is a regular annual presentation and analysis that we do to look at our student enrollment for this school year and to make enrollment projections for next school year, which will then drive the budget and staffing process for next school year. So the very good news is that for the 7th year in a row, our enrollment is up. We're up to, and this is a snapshot of enrollment that's taken on or around October 15th. So 35,813, which is over 400 students over this time last year. The majority of that growth was in the high school grades, so 7 through 12 saw the most growth in that in enrollment. We have another visualization of this growth, which is just another way of showing these are the past 7 years have seen enrollment growth, which prior to that we had seen several years of declining enrollment. Deeming way in the back. Okay, so let me go back. When you look at the breakdown a little bit further, we see that the charter school enrollment, I'm not able to aim this back into that. There we go. Our charter school enrollment has actually gone down. So we're down about 200 students in charter schools this year. And we are seeing a small decrease in non-public enrollment this year, but within that is an increase in the voucher program. So the Ed Choice voucher program has an increase, which has implications to the budget. So because of the decline in charter and non-public and the increase in the public schools, our market share has gone up. So we're at 68.9%, which is 0.7% higher than last year. Our demographic comparison, we don't have any huge changes in our demographic subgroups. We do have a 2% increase in the economically disadvantaged group, and then the Hispanic subgroup did increase 0.5%. So when another way that we look at enrollment is who are the new students that came into our district who were not here in the prior fall. That's actually over 7,000 students. So of all the districts who were not here last fall but are here this year, the students in the 3 zip codes on the west side make up 1/4 of all those new students. So that's the Cheviot Westwood area, Price Hill, and Western Hills. So in looking at new preschool students, this is our traditional dot map. So 1,100 new preschool students that are here this fall that weren't here last fall. But we can also visualize this in a new mapping feature we have, which is a heat map, which shows us kind of the density of the areas. And we can overlay that with our current preschool locations to provide Ms. Brooks and her team additional information to make sure that we are matching the demand of preschool with our preschool locations. And then we have a similar heat map for high school. This is over 2,000 new high school students in the district that were not in our district last fall. And this is the heat map of that. So you can see the high density, the red areas over on the west side. So now we turn to projections for next fall. The way we do these projections is we look at a 3-year historical average at every single school and grade level. So for example, kindergartners at Bond Hill, how many traditionally do they move up to first grade? And then we do that for the prior 3 years. So it's a very detailed projections model. And so our projections show us to be at 36,282 next fall, which is a similar growth size to what we saw this year. Traditionally, these projections are pretty accurate. This is a very accurate model for us. Over the past 3 years, the projections have been 99% accurate, which is important for the budgeting and staffing process. So that concludes the presentation. Take any questions.
Questions, Mr. Massey?
Well, thank you for that. Fascinating. I can't even think about how you would project something like this to that amount of certainty, so kudos to you on that. And I think the sheer numbers are interesting, but I think what's more important is the market share. And I believe it showed we had the largest market share CPS has had in what, how many years, 10? How many was that?
Probably is at least 7.
I'm just trying to count how many minutes switched, so. But I think that's a talking point. And yes, the numbers are up this, but it's the percentage of students. And we're getting a higher percentage and there's probably fewer children, and that can fluctuate, even though, people like the Frondors and the Blochers and the Linsners and now the Mesters are trying to help that growth a little bit. Overall, though, the city can fluctuate, but I think capturing that percentage is a major talking point. And then, so the first question I have is, so what happened in that right there, 03, 04, 04, 05, 05, 06? It's like there was mass exodus. Any insight to what happened then?
So, I'm not sure if anyone remembers when the voucher program was initially introduced, but that may have been a portion of it.
So the first decline was charter schools, or the second decline was the introduction of that program?
Okay. So that was the 03, 04 was the vouchers.
Yeah, the community school started in 2002-ish, and when they had that tier 3, but then they exploded it up to like 35.
Okay.
But those kids are choosing to return.
Choosing to come back, yeah. And then, so you talked about that we got 2,000 new high schoolers, right? Where did we lose?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. So we had a net increase of over 400, right? But that 200 was not the net. Those were the ones we gained, but we did lose some as well. I don't have the detailed analysis on the loss, but we can run that.
I'd be curious if somebody didn't like our options in this specific area or this specific area and chose something else.
Yep.
There might be something interesting there. Thank you, though. Great. Fascinating.
Yes, and I would like to suggest that the administration, possibly in collaboration with a board member, reach out to the Board of Realtors to make a presentation with this data and also with information on, preschool opportunities, Vision 2020, and the new schools such as Mercy and Cairns.
Part of that loss that you're talking about in high school is the graduation, because they graduated and then part of that number that's declining. So it's not always in the week of the district.
Right, yeah. But assuming that then there'd be new ones coming in and at the bottom that would offset that. So I think it is where we lost. That would be a good analysis. just to see if there were any hot spots that,
Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, and I would like a hard copy of the report, so that we can look at it, we've done that before, it would be useful. And I'd like to compare it. I think part of this is also the FMP is part of this, where we were in decline, which is one of the reasons that the community did what it did and gave us that additional money to increase it. I think the market share is the most important. I do believe too that as we look at the growth piece, we should be growing faster. As fast as this is, and I know it's leading the state, I mean, no system is growing as fast as we are. The reality is if we had more seats available, so my hope would be that when the administration presents some of this parallel information that's associated in part with Mercy and associated with the transportation piece and what have you, that we really look at where we need the growth particularly, and that's why this geographic piece is so important, and also we reassess the choice piece regarding our schools. And because I do know that some high schools still consider themselves as magnets when they're really not magnets and think that they can turn people away. That's not the case. They can't. They cannot set that number. So that number, I think, I would be disappointed if it didn't even grow faster, as well as with the preschool piece. If we had more space, and that's when the area that's grown the fastest and I think the best, we still need more there as well. And I think the loss piece that Mr. Messers reads, that's important because it might be urban legend. Well, when the kids get a certain age and they leave Cincinnati, I don't know that that's a legend anymore, if it's true or not true, but I think we should know that, because that should guide how we work with our growth. The other final piece of that growth, though, is the end of charters locally. And that's why when we get to assignment time, I am going to ask that the superintendent really investigate this persistent rumor that there are folks within the city proper that are planning a greater investment in creating yet another charter during the declining time of charters. And that rumor we can't seem to trace, but it totally runs counter to the market value, and it totally runs counter to anybody being our partner if they think that they are creating a charter competitor for us, particularly one that separates people culturally and racially, and brings in curriculum from another region that does not even recognize the last 100 years of curriculum development and diversity. So we need to really track that down and make a case as to why that, from a business standpoint, is a bad idea.
Good point. Ms. Bates?
Well, I was going to make an assignment as well, and actually I have some evidence that was gathered at the Council of Great City Schools that I believe I may have shared with the superintendent, and I have a very specific assignment to make as well. But yes, it's not a rumor.
Right.
Mr. Messer and then Ms. Copeland-Dansby.
yeah, so now we're thinking data, and I'm now other things are going through my head. I'd be curious how many come into our schools at 7th grade, to know how many are getting vouchers or otherwise in the earlier stages, but then wanting to come to us for high school. And if there's, and I don't know this, I guess I'll learn sooner or later, but as you apply to a Walnut Hills or you apply to any of the schools, is there preference for people that are homegrown within our district? Or can you come from a parochial school and then perhaps take the seat of somebody who's been in our district? Is that something that's possible or that can be looked at? Because we have to work on behalf of the children of Cincinnati, ensure they get the best education possible. Part of it is ensuring that every dollar that's owed our district comes to our district. And we have to say, if you're going to choose another option here and take our money this way, it's not gonna give you advantage when it's time for then you want our option in 7th grade. So the question is, can we see how many enter from another source, 7th grade and beyond? And then, so that'd be interesting, and then is there something we can do to massage how students are selected for our schools, given priority to those that are homegrown?
Thank you. Ms. Copeland Dansby.
Thanks for an amazing presentation. Since we're asking questions, I think it might be important to equate the decline in charter selection with our finances. So based on how much it shrank or is shrinking, can we divert those dollars to other places within the budget? And or are we really seeing any decline as it relates to financials? I would think it would or could, because the cost in that would be less.
Yeah, so that late in October is when the Ohio Department of Education changes their funding formula from projections for last year's students to new students, but it takes the charter school data a little bit to catch up. So in the November funding reports, we should see a decline in the tuition deduction.
Okay. Well, the tuition deduction, transportation, you know, and any other costs that we have to front for
Correct.
outside charters. Okay, good. Along with that, though, I'm really impressed by the growth, and I'm grateful to see the growth, as well as the new projections for the new school year. Over time, from my chair, I've seen the great work that the district is doing, superintendent, in that we have better offerings with our high schools. Our neighborhood schools are doing an amazing job, and that's something that I particularly focused on some years ago. Of course, our graduation rate on the incline, as well as continual success with our third grade reading. Having an amazing newer superintendent and leadership team also, you know, it's just very attractive as a parent. You want to bring your children to a district where you're seeing successes, and you know what's appropriate for each of our children, and so that's equity. And so being able to send my child to a neighborhood school versus having to go across town, which is, you know, that whole separation that we've had for so many years. So congratulations to my colleagues and our leadership in moving the district forward.
Ms. Bolton.
One last thing from my standpoint, and this speaks to the idea that Ms. Spades had regarding sharing with the realtors, who are often resistant to where we need to be on this, but I think it's just an important piece, and I'll say it again, even if it's a cartoon, even if it is animated, I think it's really crucial that the general population understand the pathways that you have within Cincinnati Public Schools. From a standpoint, they have a tendency to think of like a suburban district, there's only going to be 1 or 2 high schools, or there's only going to be 1 grade school, or what have you. The idea that you have multiple paths from pre-K all the way through. And the other piece of that is if we can make a concerted effort as the preschool piece grows, we should make a concerted effort to make sure 2 things, that those preschool people stay with us, and a majority of them do, that we could be more if we had the right seats and what have you. But also if we could make an effort to think in terms of how we attract the families that are currently in the charters. Because I'd rather us kind of help decide when they come than when they show up. Because the show up has a detrimental effect on our scores and our brand, if you will. But if we can have a concerted effort to really go at this is when you do it. And I think that way we could phase them in more properly, and they could be more successful initially and long-term for us.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Ms. Trimble Oliver, thank you so much for this presentation. I just want to say that good presentations, very strong presentations like this, spur thinking with the board, among board members as to what our future is going to look like. So it did its job. Thank you. All right. Superintendent Mitchell, would you introduce our next presentation?
Absolutely, but before we close out the last conversation, I just wanted to Ms. Bolton's point, the leadership team has put together a continuous improvement team centered around regaining our market share of charter kids. So we will have an all-out strategy in plan to recruit kids back and be able to measure our results.
Thank you.
All right, so preschool, we're very happy to have Vera Brooks, who is our interim director for early childhood, come and talk about the work that she's been engaged in and our increase in enrollment, and specifically around continuous improvement as it relates to preschool. Not just increasing our number of preschool students, but also increasing the preparedness our preschoolers are when they enter kindergarten. So Vera Brooks.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm happy to be here today to give you a very quick update. I've been very excited this year. I was invited to participate in Impact U. And Impact U, our global aim is for 3 or 4 years within our boundaries to have the optimal health, academic, social, and emotional skills as they enter kindergarten. And it's been a wonderful experience for me to fine-tune my skills and to continue to grow, but also to share the information with my teammates in the department as we continue to expand. So looking at our hubs at a glance, last year it was exciting that the district opened 3 hubs for enrolling preschoolers throughout our district. One was at Carthage, Leap, and Vine. We're heard input from the community that we needed to renovate or revamp a little bit, so we are in the works of that, where our assistant school coordinators, as they're meeting with the parents, will have more private areas as they are enrolling, that any parent or guardian can go to any of the 3 hubs to enroll a child throughout the district. Also, we've been having monthly meetings with the 3 hub staffs to have ongoing training. Some of those trainings have been team building, opioid training, cultural competency, peer review of documents, and grant eligibility, EMIS Power School training as we're enrolling, customer service, and how to support one another. Very excited to see at Hub 1, they are now 90% enrolled in the schools they enroll in. Hub 2, 97, Hub 3, 93. So our total enrollment as of date is 93.77%. At this time last year, it was approximately around 90%. So we are showing gains there. We're extremely excited that we've had the support, and we will be rolling out Registration Gateway in January. So we will be having training in December with the staffs in the hubs. And then this will allow more access and equitable access across our district within our boundaries for families to enroll faster and for us to be able to service them even quicker so they can have their child in a quality preschool. Looking at our current status of our funding, we are funded through a variety of sources. Currently in our Head Start funding, we have 650 seats, all are filled. In our Early Childhood Educational Grant funding source, we have 499 seats, all are filled. In our Preschool Promise, we currently have 641 students being funded, and we continue to recruit. In our preschool disabilities classrooms, there are 248 seats which they are enrolled through student services. 191 of those seats are filled. And we are looking to continue to enroll and have our children continue to be serviced through our district. We have 41 sites, 120 classrooms. We are 34 of our sites are star rated, 5-star rated, 3 or 4, and 4 sites applications are pending. And we are in the very active process currently of making sure that all of those star ratings are going through their annual reviews to maintain their rating, or they are in their 3-year cycle where they are doing an initial review again to maintain their rating or to gain a higher rating. Our Preschool Promise enrollment to date, we're very excited, has surpassed last year's goal this time of 1,341. that currently both community providers and Cincinnati Public Schools, there are currently 1,435 students being serviced with their families. So we're moving forward. We're extremely excited that in January we will be opening up our site, Aiken New Rising Stars at Aiken New Tech College Hill, and adding another classroom at Rising Stars at Sailor Park. So the Rising Stars at Aiken will have 40 seats. They will be preschool promise dollars along with tuition, along with the classroom at Sailor Park. We have reached out and been working with Aiken and Ms. Votal already to start planning of how we can integrate some programming. We also, Rising Stars at Sailor Park, we've reached out with Mr. Souter and his community providers, Clicky, and we've already had a couple of meetings with the community and LSDMC to make sure that they have a clear understanding of what the opportunity will be there at Sailor Park. So we're very excited. Thank you to the facilities department, who's been working very, very diligently to ensure that the classrooms are built and prepared, and we will start delivering materials and begin staffing this month. So we're working very hard this year to put a variety of system structures and actually the creation of a preschool practice and operational guide. Things are in place, but as we are expanding, we need to have things put in a manner or in writing that no matter who is in and out, that they would have a clear understanding and a reference and a better understanding of preschool. This includes, in the operational guide, we are developing an area around step up to quality, a section for administrators so they understand the compliance that has to be in place for preschool, along with just what are our day-to-day operations. If you have someone, NAPA, that calls in, what are some options to make sure that we remain in compliance? How can a teacher reach out to receive assistance with some academics to make sure that we're starting to put more differentiation into our curriculum as we're preparing them for kindergarten readiness. And with that, kindergarten readiness, we have been working this year with Emily Campbell and her wonderful curriculum team, Lucy Collier, who's the K-3 manager, and we've already begun our collaboration to begin the alignment of the English language arts standards at the kindergarten level and start looking backwards of how we can start putting more ELA and also mathematics in place to prepare our children for when they enter kindergarten to do better on the crawl and be kindergarten ready. Instructional practices, staying within our compliance, but also looking at thinking outside the box. How can we add more? How can we enrich our program and continue to prepare our children? And then the progression of pedagogy. And Ms. Bolton, you gave me a great idea, because one of the new structures that we're going to be looking at is how can we look at our P4s and put something in place now to ensure that we can up that 60% that continue on with us in kindergarten. So thank you for that. We also collaborate strongly with the community. The collaboration between Cincinnati Public Schools and the CPP, we are talking on a regular basis. Charlotte Turner, who is the director of CPP, we meet weekly and talk continually to hopefully open up the communication line. We have gotten together to look at the alignments of not only your meetings, but their meetings, that we can get a better flow of how that communication or how the information is going to come between the two boards. And we're hoping to continue to build a positive, engaging relationship amongst everyone and all our partners. And I think that's it.
The board members have questions and comments. Mr. Davis, followed by Mr. Messer and Mr. Ross.
And thank you very kindly for your presentation. Speaking specifically to the last piece in regards to communications, do you ever meet with our 5 appointees.
Actually, I meant to mention that, yes. I started that a month ago, and our representatives, they wanted to meet, and we have a meeting coming up being scheduled at the end of this month before holiday. They wish to meet every other month or monthly if needed, and we meet down here in the department room to discuss what their goals are, discussions, or anything that you all wish for me to take back. I'd be more than happy to say,
So-
yes, we are starting monthly
So how do you
meetings.
want to process that? So are you working with Carolyn, I'm sorry, Board Member Jones to process that?
That would be
Yeah,
fun.
let me, actually, I was gonna, as we got into our board matters discussion, I had a conversation with Father Graham and Shiloh about that very point, how the boards come together in the same type of structure as Ms. Brooks works with Shiloh. There's an interest in the boards doing more work to talk together at certain points.
I was going to bring it up at Board Matters too. but
Okay.
Since it was beautiful how she had it out there. Thanks, Ms. Brooks, I have awesome confidence in you.
Thank you.
Other, Mr. Messer?
Yes, and I also had that question, and I think it would be good to get, our liaisons that, I was so excited with a preschooler to be a liaison, and then we didn't have any meeting necessarily, so that'll be good to connect those. And I love the idea of the hubs, and we personally used one of those, and it worked beautifully last year. So the gateway, is that a portal?
Registration gateway, currently customer care is using
Okay.
it. It is, but it is using the computer, and it's so you're doing the registration process, but you can access it through like a phone
Sure.
or a laptop. Now, we will still need to have that final interview with the parent prior to actually enrolling, but they would be able to register on the computer or through technology.
So I have, and I'm sure this has been done, but I have this vision of Vera's van, branded, that rolls into Taste of Cincinnati, rolls into Black Family Reunion, rolls in front of Church Revival, rolls in
It
front
sounds
of
like the hood of
community. Yeah.
You were really close.
And we'll all get out there, have a whole bay of iPads or a bay of computers, and literally signing people up where they are. I think that could be like, meet you at home, meet you at church, but we're here to get your kids signed up. So I think a mobile hub, or Veer's wagon, whatever you call it, Veer's van. Veer's van, yeah, alliteration there, but I think that could add another dimension. Because so many times, like, you live here, you're like, well, shoot, I gotta take a bus to here, check here, oh wait, I gotta pick my kid up. Can't necessarily get there, but if you're like, well, I'm gonna show up here on this schedule, it would give us some great outreach for CPS, register the babies, and I think that could be fun. And I'm volunteer to help.
On a smaller scale, we have reached out to Project Connect and with Human Services, and we are actually doing 2 families in shelters, whatever, and we are seeing an increase in our enrollment of the children because the preschool children are just there.
Yeah.
So we have reached out and they're working very collaboratively with us that we can go to them.
And I think the other piece, I bet there are grant dollars, whether it's the Hill Foundation or others, you offer this to say, our goal is to ensure every child is connected to an opportunity for preschool education, because we've all invested here. Here's a way for us to get out there, and I think you could get grant money to cover 100% or donations.
Mr. Borowski?
Thank you, Ms. Brooks, that was awesome. And I will offer up the use of my Explorer for the Fierce van, if you don't want to put the wear and tear. So I think the only reason this question is popped up because the back-to-back presentations made me think of it. I don't know if I would have thought of it otherwise. Is there any data from last year yet, and you probably know where I'm going with this, on students who only did 1 year of preschool through preschool promise dollars and community providers where they went to kindergarten? Did they come to CPS?
Actually, we are working on that, and yes, they did.
Oh, okay, good.
And I'm working closely with Brian Sershin with the accountability assessment. And we are starting to collect that data now of where there were children that were P3, P4s last year, where those P4s went, and then actually we're waiting for the crowd to come in, but to see actually how they were scored. So we have started to collect that baseline data. Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Colton Davis.
Yeah, it's great information. I really appreciate it. I want to echo, and I guess we'll get to it in board matters, but the 5 appointees and just the strength that we were expecting them to have to interact with the board, and how that comes together collaboratively with this board is extremely important. So I think we'll get to that. I've been touting, not necessarily Vera's van, but the same concept for a long time, and that's going to the places where people are. So I'm really glad to hear you say that you're going to shelters and that. I can remember an initiative with Head Start. Oh gosh, this would have been 20 years ago. And there was a crew of folk who would literally knock on doors in our most inner city communities with a cry out for preschool enrollment. And while I don't have an Explorer or a van, I'm having help out with doors, and or to just where folks are gathered. I would suggest that we get a calendar of events related to spring and definitely through the summer, and get there and be there. Being accessible to folks matters, and when you're welcoming to families, that matters as well. We're in a technology age, and so we can use iPads and that, and have people signed and enrolled immediately. But I love the work that we're doing. I love the hubs and that, and I just encourage you to keep up the great work. Thank you.
Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Thanks for the presentation. And again, I emphasize, I want us to be very aggressive about signing folks up for preschool and then keeping them in the district. And I want to see, we've mentioned this before, and I think it was just last time we met, just emphasizing too, additional efforts regarding tuition seats and finding ways to have space that doesn't dislocate anybody else, but that's a great way to expand and obviously also diversify the student population as it matriculates through the system. I have a question about the deserts, because in the report that CCI put together, and as well as the pilot folks put together, they mentioned several of the deserts, preschool, quality preschool access deserts. And it was Avondale and Evanston, Mount Airy, Walnut Hills, West Price Hill, East Price Hill, Westwood, East Westwood, Winton Hills, and Riverside, Sedamsville area. Those deserts, you've started to at least address at least part of it with Mount Airy in the College Hill piece. I mean, that sort of is within the vision, and then Westwood might be something where we're talking in terms of as we grow Mercy, whatever Mercy becomes, there's so many different kinds of buildings there. But then also, I'm very excited to see about the Sedamsville and Riverside. Will the Sedamsville and Riverside kind of desert be able to at least be somewhat serviced by Sailor Park, or do we have to look also further east?
Well, we did speak about that with the Sailor Park staff, and we will be able to service some of that area, Riverside and Sedamsville. So we already have around 7 or 8 families that are in the process of signing up for Sailor Park. So we were seeing, okay, where will that kind of land by the end of this year? I have been working with Mr. Adams, Chief of Operations. He's been wonderful to look at the map and to start looking at where are some areas and we could locate. We know Westwood is another area that would be growing. All of our classrooms are full there. So we will continue to expand, and he's working with some applications possibly.
And additionally, on expansion, and since we all are very interested in the diversification demographically and serving as many folks as we can, again, we talked about Montessori expansion in the district, whether it's that 3rd high school in some years ahead, or whether it's having more Montessori preschools available to get the kids and families started. So it's just something to think about. Could I ask, and I don't know the terminology, but I know several years ago we went through who grants, or is it grantor regarding Head Start. Is that coming up in the next, or did that already get settled regarding Head Start seats
That's
regionally?
instead of actually the community action agency, I get to my next meeting in January, and that is when they will start the process to renew or re-up for the next 5 years, and I have to request that.
Okay, and my question then is, and I don't mean to open this can of worms now, and I'm going to, what the heck. I know there was a concerted effort for us to think about several years ago, the last time grantorship was in the play. There was a good board discussion over a couple of months that whether or not CPS should be involved with not just trying to get more seats, but should CPS apply for being the grantor. I just would like us to think about that discussion. We determined at that time not to, because of some things particularly that were happening in Toledo that became, I think, charged the community up. And so that was a problem, but I don't know if that's where we still are. It was also going to be, as we were thinking about preschool promise, and it was not the time to, even be stronger than we are. So I think it'd be great to, as you go to that meeting, it'd be great to report back as to what you find out.
Ms. Bates?
I think that's a great point for a couple of reasons. One, we have a governor who's very interested in expanding preschool money. And becoming a grantor would certainly make sense because we're the leader in the state in preschool expansion. So having to go through another agency 100% of the time really doesn't make sense with the expansion that we're going through right now. Number two, and as a result, this line of thought, thank you, Ms. Bolton, that this would be an assignment that I would make for finance, or you could make for finance, that we discuss this with our governmental relations people to kind of feel out, the scenario, and if this would raise flags or cause ill will, or if this is an opportune time. So if you would like to make that assignment, that would be welcome, I'm sure. That would help you out.
Okay, last question.
On that assignment, just for history's sake, one of the reasons that we were interested at that time and then figured out politically, socially, it wasn't a good time to do it, for the reasons I just said, was that we had gone through this, I think at least 4 years of declining seats that we were being given in preschool, and it was really hurting us. I mean, our district has assumed responsibility for kindergarten when the state wasn't helping, full day kindergarten, having our own local folks pay for it. And once we had the reduction in Head Start seats coming to us, then we also said we'll spend what we need to spend to make sure that these things happen. So there was a history of declining seats that really was hurting our growth, and actually probably stymied some of our growth that we're seeing now.
Ms. Brooks, thank you so much for your presentation. It sets the tone for our conversation that we're going to have under board matters as well. Thank you so much. Okay, Ms. Bolton, please present the following resolution.
Yes, thank you. Just again, for history's sake, these were resolutions, or these were policy changes that were introduced the last time we met in here, but they were written up in one resolution. So what we are proposing now is that it was more convenient and more clear, I should say, it was clear if they were going to be separate resolutions, and I think the Vice President suggested that. So we bring back the same resolutions, but not the same policies, but in two separate resolutions this time. And I'll start with the first one, a resolution amending Board Policy 2260, which is non-discrimination and access to equal educational opportunity. And I submit as written and as you saw before and as it remains still, and hope for a second and approval.
Is there a second? Discussion? Yes, Ms. Copeland-Davis.
I have a question. In the policy, and the pages are not numbered, but it's like 1, to 3, the back of page 3. In order to achieve the aforesaid goal, the board directs the superintendent to review current proposed courses of study and textbooks to determine any bias based upon race, color, gender, gender identity or expression, sex, sexual orientation, disability, religion, national origin, ancestry, or culture, etc. How do we do that? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but is there a review panel or team specifically related to our textbooks?
Yes, so we could work through that with the curriculum department as well as with the curriculum council. So we have curriculum council delegates from each of our schools that make up each content area could do that review for us.
Okay. I'm just always concerned that how often do we do it, or is it a set time period? Or?
I'm not sure that we've done that type of a review. It's definitely something that we will do as we are adopting, or we bring before the board new text to adopt. So that probably should have been done and was done for social studies, and it will be done for English language arts for this year as we bring it to the board for adoption. It'll actually be easier to do it as we adopt as opposed to necessarily going back to what we currently own. But we'll be coming forward with more adoptions.
That's great, and I'm only encouraging that we pay specific attention to our current textbooks and that they are rich in culture for these same purposes and reasons. Thank you.
Ms. Bolton?
Just to add to that, I think it's important through the adoption process, and we've seen in student achievement that indeed that sort of effort is put forth and was put forth for social studies particularly. And again, I will tell the same story of when the superintendent was deputy superintendent and she went to Taft High School to meet with some students. They were very clear about what they wanted to see in their curriculum and their textbooks, and immediately she brought that back, and that was 3 years ago to my recollection now. And indeed, that did influence social studies, yes,
Right.
and significantly so. And I think we all asked really great questions when social studies came for adoption, that indeed the diversity piece and others. And it also is one of the reasons I am worried about some of the rumor regarding the new charter that's being proposed, because they use Texas as their example for curriculum.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Borowski?
Aye.
President Jones?
Aye. Thank you. Ms. Bolton?
Now, the
please
second,
present the resolution.
thank you. The second one, which again is mentioned, is resolution amending board policy 2260.01, section 504 ADA, prohibition against discrimination based on disability. We present as written, hope for a second and acceptance.
Is it second? Any discussion? Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Borowski?
Aye.
President Jones?
Aye. Mr. Borowski, please present the resolution.
Yeah, thank you so much, President Jones. A little backstory on this. The city of Cincinnati will be present the resolution.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, thank you. So a little backstory. The city of Cincinnati will be taking up a tobacco 21 ordinance in probably early December-ish that would prohibit the sale of tobacco products, including vape pens, paraphernalia, etc., to anyone under the age of 21. The important word is sale, as General Counsel Holling will tell you, because it does not penalize the young person. It also doesn't penalize the person who has the job at the corner store who needs that job. It penalizes and puts the onus of this on the owner of the store. Columbus and Cleveland have passed similar tobacco 21 ordinances. This one has been drafted by American Heart Association in collaboration with Interact for Health. As you can probably tell, exceptionally interested in and passionate about it for numerous reasons. The most specific of which is that we oversee the education of 37,000 children. And as it says in here, 5.6 million Americans under the age of 18 are projected to die prematurely from tobacco-related illness. We know that if the age is raised to 21, that much less folks will be starting smoking when they're in high school, and that's usually when you develop the addiction. So This is pretty self-explanatory. I would just like to highlight a couple things, if that's okay. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this, we'll, like I said, go to committee to city council probably in early December, and then before the full council sometime following that. This resolution urges the city of Cincinnati, or encourages them to pass the ordinance, but then Board Member Bolton took it one step further, which I know I appreciated, to extend it to encourage other municipalities and governing bodies within our district's limits to consider something similar. So I'll just pull out a couple things here that I think are important. 95% of adult smokers begin smoking before they turn 21. Whereas ages of 18 to 21 are a critical period when many smokers move from experimental smoking to regular daily use. Whereas tobacco use is the most preventable cause of premature death in the United States, I'll draw your attention back to 5.6 million Americans under the age of 18 will likely die this year from tobacco-related illness. Whereas the Board of Ed, you all will remember, recently revised Board Policy 7434 and resoundingly supported the inclusion of the recommendations of Cincinnati Health Department. Therefore, be it resolved, the Board supports prohibiting the sale of tobacco products inclusive of e-cigarettes and paraphernalia to those under the age of 21 within the geographic boundaries of the Cincinnati School District. Be it further resolved, Board respectfully encourages Cincinnati City Council to pass an ordinance amending their municipal code to prohibit sale of tobacco, etc. to those under 21. And lastly, be it further resolved, this is the piece that I believe Board Member Bolton sort of had a hand in suggesting, that the Board encourages other local communities across Ohio and the state of Ohio to prohibit sale of tobacco products, etc. So I just want to give that little backstory of why that was important.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Borowski?
Aye.
President Jones?
Aye. Thank you. Okay, so as we move forward in, under our board matters item, just to kind of set the stage a little bit, and then I'm going to ask Ms. Bolton, don't be shocked, to present, because you suggested it for this agenda item. Okay, so as you all remember, we received a book, I guess it was about 165 pages initially, around the wage implementation item. Following that, yes, and we had, following that because when we got the link, we also had a presentation from Ellen Vera and others, a shortened form that really produced like several recommendations for the wage implementation pilot to proceed. Since then, there's been conversation and discussion among board members, and also some feedback that we gave to them about the fact that we had not had an opportunity to respond formally, and we were sort of late with them coming to us to ask for our feedback. So here we are now, needing to discuss this report. In addition, we just recently received a link to the actual project that is scheduled to move forward in January. Now, since that time, Father Graham and Shiloh reached out to me, because if you look in their timeline in the more recent report, they want to move forward with this in January and wanted to have and requested an opportunity to come to the board in our meeting, and my suggestion was the first meeting in December, to talk with us and get our input and feedback into the pilot. So that kind of sets the tone for this discussion, and we also, all the things that other folks have brought to the table about our partnership and how we communicate came up in the discussion with Father Graham and Shiloh, and we also want to have some conversation about that as well. They have expressed interest in doing something board to board, but I hear other board members talking about how effective and successful it was when we had the liaisons working with that one group. So we can talk about that further. So Ms. Bolton, I'm going to ask you to introduce this particular subject.
Yeah. To your credit, you've introduced this topic in the last couple of months, but because of the length of that report and everything else that was going on, we all asked for a bit of a delay in the opportunity to discuss it, so that everybody had the opportunity to read it and think about it. And so there are two things. There are the initial CUCI report, which is over 100 pages, and then there's the 15 or so page pilot that is kind of born in part from the larger report. And so part of the issue was that we don't seem to yet have all these different entities coordinating our work schedules with one another as to when we see something and when we have to advise our 5 representatives or the superintendent or Ms. Brooks or whomever as to where the board might be. So we seem to be lagging, but all of our meetings are very set and we meet more than anybody else in the world. So it is a matter of those folks coordinating with us and us coordinating with them so that we aren't holding the operation up, but that we also have to have more lead time than a day or 2 weeks or having a presentation that we didn't see beforehand presented to us. So that was the concern, and we had to work out how that was going to happen. When they first presented the full CUCI report, and they did a bit of a brief report at SAC, at Student Achievement, and then they did an even briefer report to us by just sort of opening it up and unveiling it. Some of the things that we said, I do think made an impact on their pilot, most particularly the idea that we were concentrating fully on preschool and only preschool and not childcare. That was what the public monies were asked for and promised for. And so the pilot seems to be dealing with that a bit more than the larger report did. It seems to have limited it. I believe the pilot has already kind of been voted on by the Preschool Promise Board. And I'm sure our folks voted too, but it was prior to us even being able to have a recommendation as to what we liked or didn't like about it. So to your point, and everybody else's point, we also have to work out this opportunity for Ms. Brooks and our 5 people to be meeting, but they have to be getting some guidance, probably not from us, but from our superintendent who needs to get the guidance from us, so as to where we are, since this was a community promise that was made. So I think today what we're trying to do is talk a little bit about the bigger report and any kind of reservations we kind of had. And then also, we're going to have a presentation, I think, on the pilot.
Yes.
Is that on
Yes.
the pilot?
Yes.
But they want to put the pilot in effect, as you mentioned, in January, in a staged, phased piece. And I'm not sure we even agree on the vocabulary that's being used from the standpoint as even the pilot says it's going to be monitored by the Cincinnati Preschool Promise. Well, no, it's going to be monitored by the board, not us, but the Preschool Promise Board is going to be monitoring it. It's not, so we have some housekeeping issues, we have some workflow issues, let alone any substantive issues that we have about our reaction to either the big report or the pilot.
And just to follow up on that, I think that's exactly what they want from us. Is I think if we read the reports, you can see that there was some improvement overall in terms of how they described the themes, and that the feedback that we gave them the last time was around the focus needed to be on preschool versus childcare. They cleaned that up quite a bit. And so I think they did hear us, but I do agree with you that more needs to be done to make sure that the language speaks to what the oversight should look like and that kind of thing. I do agree with that.
And I think the liaison piece is important, although we have a hierarchy that could be in part the liaison. It's really the fact that even if you have a couple of board liaison folks, the couple of board liaison folks have to know what the whole board wants. So it's really more of this deliberation among ourselves and so that they can actually represent the board. And so I think it is a workflow, but considering where we are and how far everybody's come, and I will also say that the Workforce Development Council has had a big part to play, as has our CFT people have had a big part to play in the professional development piece and the career path efforts. But again, vocabulary is a problem. What is a full-time person? What's a lead teacher? Who's this? Who's that? There are other issues of the 9.5 months versus a 12-month program. Exactly, and what is the difference? So it goes to something as simple as us having an agreement on what is our vocabulary.
Other comments? Mr. Davis?
As I have opportunity for input on these preschool promise initiatives in other settings, I'll say the bulk of my comments for when the presentation on the pilot comes. But, and I want to commend CCUI, something like that, Kristen and Ellen, the group, on their work. I did follow people a couple of times, but it is such, what I got from reading the in-depth analysis is it's such a huge haul to have made the promise was a challenge. The 3 promises that were made was we would get quality improvement, we'd have technical assistance, and we'd have wage equity. And the wage equity piece is really concerned me at the quality improvement piece. So in the pilot, not considering 0 and 1-star and 2-star providers, it concerns me. It doesn't concern me from a Cincinnati Public School perspective, but we're 5-star. But it concerns me from family providers and single site providers outside of district. And I think we have to find a way to manage both of those from a promise perspective. And I can say the rest of my comments for the presentation.
Yes. Ms. Gordon?
I think one of the things that was pointed out, particularly in the pilot proposal, was that these folks that we have lauded and said how wonderful they were, particularly Denver and to a lesser extent Dayton, have not even tried to do anything about wage equity or compensation. And so this is really where we actually lead. A lot of people are expanding preschool, but the idea that we're doing this in an equitable way and addressing those great inequities that exist, we were pretty firm, very firm, as a matter of fact, regarding tuition assistance, being at 3, 4, and 5. But really want to see major investment and effort at the 1-stars and the 2-stars as it pertained to the quality improvement grants. And to the degree that the quality improvement grants in some way address the staffing, there's ways to do that without necessarily doing the how shall I say, without having tuition assistance. But one of the things that the pilot folks have said is that apparently there's 70-some% of the 3, 4, and 5-star providers that their staff, their full-time instructors, and again, it's vocabulary problems that we have here, because there's 6 different ways to refer to the same position, which gets very confusing in both of these reports, is that the $15 are happening, $15 an hour are happening in 70% of the 70% of the individuals that are the lead teachers and what have you. So the job isn't as I think when we first talked about it, there were worse things happening, or the numbers were worse. So one of the things I'm interested in is still that issue of what is the cost of quality, because the hope in part was that, and they've got a number now of 8,000 something or other, but one of the concepts was that the cost of quality would help with that wage parity. And the pilot kind of points to a certain degree that it is, and it's in 70-some% of the sites that that subsidy, that tuition effort is helping. And where it's not helping, we don't necessarily have the reports as to how it's being allocated. And is it impacting the wage piece? So, and then the PD piece, that's crucial, going through Workforce Development Council, because that too is part of that step up to quality. That could be, I would assume, be helping 1- and 2-star people. So there's a great effort there that's to be made. But I worry about the start in January, and I worry about too short, I should say, too small of a phase-in. And there are other issues, but we can, to your point, we can talk more about that when we get to the actual presentation. But they did address the child care piece, I think, successfully, and we should hold firm on 1- and 2-star receiving enough quality grants, and the 3- and 4-star 5, the tuition piece, having some impact on wage.
Okay. Other comments, questions? Mr. Messer?
Yeah, and I think to all the points, this is such an important piece, and I do think this is an effective body who's done lots of great things for our community, the school board, long before I got here. And I think this wage parity, why it's so important is so many of our children are living in homes with parents who are the working poor. They're not sitting around twiddling their thumbs. They're just not getting paid what they're valued, and our children see that. And here's an opportunity, I think, for us to really engage, hold accountable. I'm kind of like, when will this ever kick in? How long would this take? And I understand it's very complex, but I think this is something that we can really make a difference in our community that ultimately affects our children, that ultimately affects the quality of our children coming into our district, but the children of those people who are out there working, the men and women who work in the centers, et cetera. And, I think, of course, this is a group conversation, but I think getting back to that liaison where we're sitting down to say, this is like a working session. We got to work. Presentations are great, but it's like really working, and I think that's where the liaisons can bring this to life and maybe move the ball a little bit further down the court, a little faster than maybe kind of our board, that kind of thing.
Right. Okay, so unless folks have other questions or comments, it sounds to me like our focus has shifted from that first report, since they've already sort of decided that we're going to do this pilot. So I think it would be helpful for us to start, we want to be prepared. I don't know who's coming to do the actual presentation. We can find out. But again, we have to really be prepared, read the material and what have you. These are excellent comments and questions. I think this is what they want of us. But I also think in assignments, we have to start thinking about how we want to organize this workflow. And what is it, how do we work better with them, partner? What are our lines of communication and what are our roles in that? And I think that too is an expressed interest of theirs. So, yeah, so we can move forward with that. Yes.
Chair, then we need to be ready to listen to the presentation about the pilot,
Yes.
right, is what you're saying?
Yep.
And offer whatever suggestions we might have, or saying, hey, you're not doing enough, which is one of my comments. It was, we could be doing more, and we could be doing some of the things better, and there's certain things in here that I think are kind of weird. I also want us to be very careful as we talk about the wage parity, that we have to be careful even how we use those terms. Because the wage parity compared to a fully licensed preschool teacher within the Cincinnati public system, we came up for a full-time lead teacher. There's vocabulary not really parity with less necessarily CPS parity. But, and we have CPS to tell us what that livable wage is, and how much money, even what's the state of Ohio's doing something now, hour something or other. Why don't we, a lot of the money should be spent there to help the people that are in the 1- and 2-star to get ready or what have you. So there's lots of good things, but the pilot, if we can concentrate on the pilot, I think that's a better way to go. I agree with that. And this long thing, it was great, but I disagree.
All right, is there anything else then about this particular subject? Okay.
When is the presentation going to be? Is it going to be
The 10th. The presentation is, that's our first
10th.
board meeting in December, December 10th.
I thought it was another presentation.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, thanks. All right, so are we ready to move on then? We can move on. All right. Superintendent Mitchell, do you have a report?
I do have some PowerPoint slides to just guide us through this report. Happy to announce that over 700 of our high school students were able to participate in our 4th annual Career Expo, in which we had 56 organizations, companies, colleges, universities, and branches of the military there to talk with them about post-graduation options. So we're very excited about that work. This work is supported by the Business Advisory Council. The second thing that I'd like to highlight is Roll Hill celebrates Thanksgiving with La Soup Midwest Takeover. Midwest Takeover graciously offered meals to our students who have lost either a parent or guardian or caregiver within the last year. Midwest Takeover, they also do other meaningful work within our community in terms of providing backpacks for our kids as well as haircuts. And so they are an integral part of our community and provide a resource that many of our kids would like if it weren't for them. Next, I want to highlight Accounting for Kids. Accounting for Kids, this program has been around for nearly 20 years. We had 3,400 of our students across 122 classrooms participate in Accounting for Kids, in which accountants from local businesses, they go into our schools and they teach our kids about saving money, earning money, investing money, and it's a really great opportunity for our kids to interact with them, not only about accounting and financial responsibility, but also to engage with professionals and ask them questions about the things that they do. And so again, we're very happy to have been able to offer that again this year, the 19th year. South Avondale received a $250,000 grant from the Bengals to provide a field for them. I'm not sure if board member Davis would like to make any comments. I know this has been work that is long overdue and we're really excited about it.
2 words. Woot, woot.
It was a wonderful event. Our board president, Carolyn Jones, was there along with O.Z. Davis. Did I miss anyone? It was a wonderful event. Children's Hospital is engaged as well as Interactive Health. So as you can see, some checks were presented. UC Health was also represented. It's just a great event in terms of putting their arms around the kids of our school and providing a great resource. And then last, we have a little competition for schools give back. So we a friendly competition to help liven up Thanksgiving break for many of our CPS students, and 4 schools participated: Aiken, College Hill, Mount Airy, and Pleasant Hill. The competition is centered around bringing canned goods into the school to be donated to Christ Community Church. And so we provided nearly 4,000 canned goods that were collected across the 4 schools, which is an enormous amount. And so we are appreciative for our schools.
Do I have a motion to approve the recommendations of the superintendent? Second? Ms. Wagner, any discussion? Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Borowski? President Jones?
Aye. Do I have a motion to approve the revised report of the treasurer? Second? Any discussion? Mr. Davis, followed by Ms. Bates.
I just got a question on, the first agreement with Chelsea Nuss at Rockdale. It's a consultant to do something with the zoo and children's. And I was just wondering, as a process point, does the district reach out to partners prior to us paying for things that maybe they could pay for? Like, this reads to me, and I don't know if it's the whole piece, and I have not talked to this, Tubbs Wallace about this. But this reads to me like it's something that we're gonna be doing to study what's happening at the zoo and Children's Hospital around global conservation, which is Rockdale's focus. And my question is a process point in regard to, does the district reach out before we decide to spend our money? Do we reach out to partners like the zoo and Cincinnati Children's and say, do you got $32,000 for us to do this?
Well, we don't have a district process to do that. These things are usually initiated by the school, and they work with their partners, and then they decide to go. If the partner can't provide service, then they look for a contractor to do it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Ms. Davis?
Yes, and again, I'll be voting against number 7, Community Reinvestment Act agreements, just to bring attention to another abatement that has been approved by our city.
Okay, Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Ms. Bates?
No on 7, yes on the rest.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby?
No on 3C, 4B, 5F, VI, yes on the rest.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again? No on
Sure.
3C?
No on 3C, 4B, 5F, and 5I. Yes on the rest.
Thank you. Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Messer?
Yes?
Mr. Morosky? President Jones?
Yes. Thank you. Okay, moving on to inquiries and updates. I want to begin the discussion around inquiries and updates, talking about preparation for the January 7th organizational meeting. Our organizational meeting for 2019, of course, is January 2nd. 6 o'clock is our executive session, and then the regular business meeting at 6:30. We will have the material, working with our staff, to get the material out to everybody in the beginning of the month, next month. I can't give you an exact date, but I promise you it will be around, and I'm looking at Ms. Davis, around the first week in December. Okay, so we can get that out. Now, for those members who are new, and for the rest of us, this is our opportunity to think about how you want to serve the board, what specific roles, committee assignments, and things like that you want to participate in. And encourage people to try something new, and try to get in an assignment where you truly feel like that you can be of the greatest assistance and support. When we come back to and then we'll have a deadline, we'll have a time frame, so we'll send out a communication that says, please return them by such and such a date. It'll give our staff an opportunity to combine the information. Everybody will get the final copy sometime prior to, it'll go out in our packet sometime prior to the January 7th organizational meeting. So just wanted to put that out there. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay. Yes.
I don't have a question, but I do think that if we could try to work it out prior to January, it would be good.
When you want
Meaning, have the list of who wants what,
Oh.
and whatever, and even have, kind of enter into, even if we have to have public discussion versus private discussions necessarily, that would be great.
Or texting.
Yeah. Not no texting.
Sorry.
No texting, no texting.
So I just want to clarify what I think you're saying. You want the completed sheet, and I believe I said this, we will get that prior to the January 7th meeting. So it'll be, I think we could probably get that back by the last meeting, before the last meeting, which is the 17th. So if I'm understanding your question, what you're asking for is to have, what, a discussion?
Well, if we get it that late, and if it's just before January, then that does cause private conversations to take place rather than more out front as to what might be of interest. I'm just saying that there's no reason that it has to be done so privately or when we're not in session or what have you. At least have the community know at least in the direction that we're going or what have you.
Okay, so we can have, I think if we can have it out in preparation for the December 17th.
Be great.
Put it on the agenda as a board matters conversation and have that discussion there.
Service
Okay.
at a complete different model.
Wonderful, Ms. Copeland dance.
I would also like to suggest that the form be updated and complete. Last year, there were several changes related to, is this an active committee or not an active committee? The appointees to the state board and that, we know what those things are, at least until that next resolution comes up. Is that right, Ms. Bates?
We handled it at the last meeting.
That's right, so it goes around a year.
Yes.
Yeah, so we can already get that printed on the form and maybe to run by President Jones, just to make sure that the committees are the standing committees as they exist on the sheet, including CRC, ABC, those things that required a lot of changes and conversation last year.
And that was my intention, is to clean up a little bit.
All right.
You guys are kind of talking Chinese to me. Can I get an old form?
Right.
So I know what you guys are talking
Oh,
about.
yeah, you didn't see
I
that
am
one.
not
Okay.
totally oblivious, but I feel something in the air. So can I get an old form?
Yes, you can. We'll make sure you get it. We'll send
Appreciate
it
it.
out. And we'll ask for your comments. If you have any suggested changes, you can give that feedback and then we'll work with staff to get it cleaned up and send it out. Okay. Great. Anything else in prep for that organizational meeting discussion? Okay. We're gonna drop the ACEs. We're not gonna have an ACEs conversation today. It will be on the agenda sometime soon. Okay, and then finally, an update about the Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps.
Yes, I'm going to pass around a document that was recently sent to Dan Hoying. So Dan and I had the opportunity to meet with Adam Miller from TAPT regarding this. We've been working on this, quite honestly, for a year now, I believe. And so just to kind of bring everyone's recollection back to this conversation, we're interested in starting a junior ROTC. In order to get one that is funded through the state or the federal government, one would have to close within the state of Ohio in order for us to be able to open one, or we would have to be able to partner with another district who would be willing to partner with us. And so that was explored for a little while. And then Adam did come back to us, Adam Miller came back to us to say that the district could open a junior ROTC program that would be self-funded. So we would not receive state or federal funds to cover the cost of it. At this time, and this document says that at this time, only the U.S. Navy and the Army will offer junior ROTC, as well as the National Defense Cadet Corps program. The Air Force junior ROTC program is full and is not at this time taking applications. The main conversation that we discussed in SAC, Student Achievement Committee, was around the cost of this program. So on the top of page 2, it outlines that the cost is $150 per uniform for the young people, as well as a single part-time junior ROTC or National Defense instructor for the first year. The program continues to grow, then we might expect to grow to a full-time position to be able to service those young people. Towards the end of the first paragraph on page 2, it outlines federal law authorizes the service components to provide program-specific lesson plans, forms, and copy of military regulations. So along with curriculum and textbooks. So the district would have to cover the cost of the uniforms as well as the cost of the instructor. Dan, did I miss anything?
Good.
So what I provide is an overview of what this 3-page document says.
Thank you. Ms. Copeland Dansby.
For clarification, Superintendent Mitchell, are you saying that the district will pay the students' uniform? It says uniform costs can be passed along as supply costs to the student's parent or guardian or paid for by the district.
My apologies that I did not read that specifically to the group or provide that. A parent could cover those costs. I think that quite honestly the assumption was in many of our schools in which kids may be interested, they would not have the dollars to
That's my
support
point.
this, and so we would cover the cost.
Yes, I would advocate that the district pay the cost for the supply to the student. Thank you.
Okay, and given that this is an update, I'm assuming this is an ongoing discussion in student achievement.
If so assigned, we wanted to get it, since there is a kind of a time element to this regarding our own budget and whatever this year, and we wanted to get it to the board as soon as we can, but we're very happy to continue the discussion in student achievement. I will say that, I think there is an interest on Student Achievements Committee to go forward with finding out more information about it, and I think, I'm not sure, but I know that I think there's probably a consensus about wanting to get more information so that we can see if it would probably serve our families and our kids, because there is an interest in the military. Less than 1% of the population in this country participates in the military, and yet it is a very important part of our kids and families' pathway professionally and what have you. I would also add to this that there is something also called Triad, and the Triad is a health and physical education program, and since we're in that is related to the armed services, and that would be something of interest perhaps as the health and PE curriculum is being reviewed, and we might look at adoption, but that it talks about not only the health and physical stuff, but also kind of the character building and whatever. It might be a good pool development for our kids if we were to decide to do it. So I think it would be something to be thinking about. I personally think that this is a good thing to pursue, and I know we'd be happy to keep talking about it and make sure that it's taken care of in the next couple of months at student achievement, so that it could be. Well, I have one question though about it, that when we don't know necessarily the answer, the logistics of it, are we really talking about in only one school, or is it something that could be done district-wide and maybe there's a home campus for it? Those kind of logistics need to be addressed as we go forward.
Okay. Ms. Bates, did you have a question?
Yes, well, a comment. I think it's very worthy, but what sometimes tends to happen is that we look at these great opportunities in isolation, and if we are going to put this program in our schools, what are we going to cut? Because we're not getting any more money. And I would like that to be part of the conversation, because unless we get, the state, it sounds like there's quite a waiting list, even if we were in queue, and I'm not even sure we're in queue at this point, are we? And that might be something to consider, just getting in queue. And if we are to fund it ourselves, at what expense?
Mr. Messer?
Yeah, and perhaps there are dollars that free up, from the charter school, bringing children back, and that creates opportunities. So I do think, and I've known people who have had their sons and daughters go through programs like this, even in small towns in Indiana, and it is a really great program. It builds great adults. So I would be in favor of it, and, wondering if we do it as a pilot, and just have a year assessment in this school and offer, and what are the wins? My guess, though, is it would go pretty broad, because many of those children then continue on that path, and my roommate at freshman year at Purdue kind of carried it through, and he was a ROTC all the way through Purdue, and had an amazing career in the military, and then went out and into the private sector. So I'm kudos to looking into this and bringing this in. I think it's a really great program.
So it sounds like a pending assignment. So let's move on to assignments unless there are other inquiries and updates. Okay, so assignments, and can we be brief, give brief so we can?
Well, so I do have one inquiry that I can do.
Yes, okay.
The one inquiry is, I was asked recently if we have a 501c3 arm that they could give charitable contributions. We have that ability, correct? 501c3 somehow to CPS.
AG Foundation set up the 501c3 for fundraising.
So they would write to ABC, and then ABC, then if they wanted to give a charitable contribution for building a playground, they could make it to ABC, and then that could then be done, and they would get their tax credit. Okay, good.
Can I help there? Tell me if this is correct, Treasurer Wagner, whatever the person would be giving for, they can designate it to a school, to a cause.
To ABC.
But it has to be written to the 501.
Okay, thank you. So as far as assignments, number one, I think as finance chair with my finance team, levies are a real thing, and there are multiple opportunities over the next couple of years for voters to continue to support educating our children in Cincinnati. And Treasurer Wagner and I had a chance to sit down and kind of look at that schedule. And so I think it would be wise for us to hire a consultant who could look at all of the potential options, because we have keep things as they are and continue to renew. We have an opportunity perhaps to do continuing. I think we have opportunity to combine. So there's so many different things that could be done that if we had a full analysis, then perhaps we could have a consultant kind of lay out, say, here's the pros and cons of this way, here's the pros and cons of this way, bring that to the board maybe on the 17th during board matters, and let us kind of make some decision, because we have one coming next year, of course, and then a couple more then right behind, and it would give us a really informed approach to deciding the best way for those levies going forward. So that was number one. Number two was to see what the possibility of having the audit committee support in some way the STEP committee in looking at the long-term financial piece of that plan, because we have lots of great minds there from across the city who have had great ideas, and I think they also bring a certain level of credibility as we're thinking about long-term financial planning to ensure not only do we have the right things in there, but it's being presented in the right way, et cetera. So that would be the second item for me. And then the last one is we had a very brief conversation at the Finance Committee meeting. Wasn't maybe germane there as much as I think it's a more broad situation. But that whole question on restrooms in preschool classrooms. And, I hadn't really thought about it, but then when I thought about it and knowing my specific little guy, like the whole moving them down the hallway and how disruptive that could be versus having it right there. And I thought, wow, wait a minute, my kindergarten classroom, I remember it had it in the back in the corner. So the question is, as it relates to preschool classrooms, what percentage of them have bathrooms in or adjacent to, right immediate there. And I think this might take a little work to look into, because of those that don't, what would it cost to get the increased, what's that cost that would allow us to have that additional time back for classroom time with the instructors, as at least, I think some of us got an article and I read, and then I Googled again and found something else. That's a real thing. And I think it would be worth us at least looking into that.
Thank you. Mr. Roski.
Thank you. I have an assignment for Superintendent Mitchell. I believe he's the right person. So I am a huge fan of Vision 2020, unabashedly so, and the numbers have shown us that it works. And I was curious if it didn't already exist, if we could make it exist. But if it does exist, if you could just shoot it to me, what the rationale is behind not having K through 12 schools participate in it, at least the K through 6 folks. And if there is one, I'm sure it's been done, but if it hasn't, if maybe it's as simple as a memo or bullet points, because I know there's at least one K through 12 school that has shown great interest because they've been making some changes and they were excited about it, so I was curious.
If I could just respond, so we believe it totally makes sense for Euler and Riverview East, their K-6 portion of the building to become a Vision 2020 school. So yeah, very welcome to that.
Ms. Bates.
Yes, my first assignment is to the board, and that is to write a letter of congratulations to our new State Board of Education member who represents us, and to invite her, when the schedule is announced, to our monthly finance committee meetings, to join our governmental relations staff and report what is happening at the state board, and to allow some feedback from finance to occur. We started doing this with our state board member Bruns, and it was very effective. We had input into the graduation requirement changes. So on behalf of us, President Jones, and the board, I ask that you write that letter, and then we will follow up with a letter when the schedule is announced, when the committee is formed. My second one is, and this goes back to an earlier conversation that Ms. Bolton raised, and I have a little more specific information that I received at the Council of Great City Schools, that indeed there is interest from some of our partners in opening a charter school in the area. And the name of the charter school is IDEA, if anybody wants to Google it. They serve primarily, or they're successful serving primarily Hispanic children. And some of our partners are involved in the collaboration in the organization of this effort. So my assignment would be to the treasurer to report to finance, and I know two of the partners in particular are TFA and YMCA. I am concerned in particular about YMCA because they do serve us in a big way. I would ask that all contracts that we have with YMCA be reviewed first by Treasurer Wagner and then reported to Finance Committee. And the major concern I have is that an agency that is entering in direct competition with us, have student identifiable information that they could use to their advantage in recruitment and establishment of a school. If they have information that is only, that is available through public information, that's one thing. But to use information that they obtain for us to serve our kids when they will be in direct competition with us, I think needs to be reviewed by Finance Committee and the board.
Ms. Bowman.
Yes, I would like the administration to look further into the idea of the grantor status regarding preschool seats of Head Start and see what that application looks like. It's something to perhaps revisit. I have no end in mind, but to revisit that as a possibility. Also regarding preschool, there, I'd like us to begin to look at where people work, not just where they live, as a way to increase our preschool numbers and seats. I think specifically, if you look at the Vine Street School, especially as we're starting to move out the camp folk to the next place, we have to be looking at what that Vine Street school is going to be. And it makes perfect sense to me that it would be someplace where people going to work downtown would drop their kids off. As well as part of that, looking at what I think we just sort of mentioned in an offhand comment over here, made sense, the length of day for some of our preschools and length of year for some of our preschools. And if I could, I would like from the treasurer a list of all of those master services agreements that we have, MSAs, with what entities we have them. And then the other piece is something follow-up. What employees do we pay that are employees of other entities as we get ready for our little Donnybrook about crossing guards? I'd like to know how many people, other people's employees we're paying. Because if we're paying them, they should be, I think, our employees, if we could do that. And then I want to know if we have any of our employees that other people are paying. Because that gets very confusing.
Okay, so you're asking me, if I can ask for clarification.
Please.
Of employees that we pay, but we pay vendors, we don't pay employees directly, or they would be our employees. So
I
you're asking
understand
me
that.
for
Are our crossing
contracts.
guards vendors?
No,
No.
we pay the city.
Exactly. So that starts to be employees
Okay.
of theirs. They're in their bargaining unit membership, they're in that's who does the benefits. So I know how we've dealt with contractors and vendors to properly, legally have people get
Yeah.
compensation. I'm not talking about that, although that's an interesting
So
topic too.
you're asking me for a list of all of our outsourced contractors.
If that's what we
Yes.
call them. My thought is school nurses, my thought is crossing guards, and if there's anybody that we have that is our employee that some other entity is paying.
Yes.
Thank you.
Other assignments, Ms. Bolton Dansby.
Sort of a question / assignment. Have we decided about an RFP for the facilitator to do the work for the strategic planning process?
It has not been decided, and HR is not in the room, but the RFP did launch. I would need to just check the date in terms
Oh,
of.
so we did indeed?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay,
It
yep.
launched.
I was
Yes.
asking for an update. Thank you.
I will provide.
Thank you.
Okay. Other assignments? Okay. Having no other business before us, I declare the meeting adjourned.